What's one of the biggest challenges for people trying to negotiate their compensation? It's understanding how to go about it. And nothing is more important than building a really good comp model. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to cover really three specific models. We're going to cover Google's model, we're going to cover Amazon's model, and then Meta, Microsoft, and Apple. They all have the same model, so we'll take a look at one of those and talk through it. So let's dive right in. So what I did was, I want to share my screen, obviously, and I'm going to go through what this looks like, how this works, right? So let's imagine that we spoke with our Google recruiter and our initial offer for whatever position was 150K base. We're focusing in on a 15% target bonus. That would be for positions from L3 to L5 at Google. They're going to give us 200K in equity. The breakdown is 38, 32, 20, 10 in terms of how that equity pays out over 4 years. And then the initial offer has no sign-on bonus. So there's really two items I want you to create when building a comp model. Step one is to determine, well, what is my target compensation? And let's say when we were coming in and interviewing for this role, we were thinking, hey, I want about 300K in year one to actually accept this role. Now, them coming in at an offer around 250K, okay, great. We have a lot of room to play with. So if I want to try and get as close to that 300K number as possible, but come in a little bit lower, here are the numbers I came up with. So now I'm going to move the base up by 10K to get my target base at 160. Same 15% target bonus. I need to move the equity up by 75,000 and I need to add in a 10K sign-on. That 298,500 number is intentional. Using round numbers when we negotiate is not great. If I say I want 300K, there's not a lot of thought process. If I say I wanted 298,500, a little bit more thought goes into that. At least that's the impression that the person you're negotiating with gets. Now, we're not negotiating on that number. In order to get our number, we have to anchor high. And here's the beauty. All the companies we're speaking about today, they are not going to rescind your offer because you anchor high. Now, of course, I want you to come in with massive amounts of gratitude and make sure that you're being gracious and kind. But if we're taking a look at these initial numbers, let's scroll up a little bit. Let's push on the base. What do we know? The base salaries at these tech companies are really thin, meaning that for any job offer, when we're getting in the normal ranges, even manager ranges, it's not going to jump up that much from the initial offer, usually about 5, 10, 15K at the top end. But we're not supposed to know that as candidates, and obviously we want to negotiate. So I put the anchor at 175K base, again, still a 15% target bonus. But then I really pushed up on the equity. Equity is the most negotiable item at these companies. So I put it at 445, and I definitely wanted to build in a strong sign-on for myself of 25K. Now that brings our anchor to 395K. So if we scroll up a little bit, we can see, oh wow, that's 150K more. That is a big, big number to ask for. But that's okay. Again, going with a high anchor with these companies is okay. And it's very intentional that we did not go into the fours. Into the fours is just such a big leap. To go from the twos to the threes, there's some psychology there. So I always like to keep it at the next number up if possible. That's not always going to happen, and you'll see that in other models. But keeping it under 400K here, it will be super, super valuable for you. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to show you how to build out that model over time for Google. But before we do that, let's just go through what some of the other company models would look like. So for Amazon has one of the more unique models. Google, we know the equity is a little bit front loaded. Now at Amazon, their biggest difference is the equity is really backloaded, and they only do bonuses in year one and year two, and they're usually pretty hefty sign-on bonuses. So I tried to follow somewhat similar numbers in these models, but let's say at Amazon we get the offer of 150, we get a sign-on bonus of 70K in year one, 50K in year two, and about, again, that same number in shares at around 200K. I put it at 198K. Why? Amazon's actually going to give you a share amount, and then that share amount is reflective of an average stock value over the previous month. Right now that's hovering around 180, so just to make it really clean, I did 1100 times 180, and of course we get to this 198K. And you can see it's heavily backloaded, so it's 5% in year 1, 15% in year 2, 40 in the back years. Now in this model that I created, all the years are the same. That's typically not the case. Each year is going to skew a little bit. It's not going to be this perfect model, but just to put in the original offer, I wanted to make it really clean. So same sort of process. Maybe our target is, hey, we know that that base isn't going to move up by more than probably 10K. So let's put our target at 10K more. Now with the sign-ons, we want to definitely increase these sign-ons. That's a great way to negotiate at Amazon. They'll almost always move the year 1 and year 2 sign-ons up. And then of course, we need to bring this equity number up as well. And so again, we're kind of looking at this model and we're saying, okay, 273, 276, 270, 270, pretty flat, pretty even over time. And of course, now what do we need to do? We need to anchor high. Now, with Amazon, the tone might be a little bit different. This number's too high, we're gonna rescind. Maybe a slightly more aggressive tone has been more consistent or more the theme I've seen coming from Amazon. Don't worry about it, they're not gonna rescind. You still need to anchor high. So again, I would recommend anchoring maybe 20 to 25K more, so 175K. We're doubling the year 1 and year 2 sign-ons from 70 and 50 to 140 and 100. And obviously that initial share number was 1100. So we definitely want to at least double it, if not more. And I'm always going to kind of recommend that. On the equity portion, go in at least double in the anchor, sometimes more depending on how high the level is. And then that would break down this number to get to 414, and these would be our numbers over time. And again, they're staying pretty consistent, 335, 337, 340, 340. You might see a little bit more inconsistency in the year-over-year numbers, but they should be relatively close, and that's kind of how Amazon builds their offers. Now, the nice thing about Meta, Microsoft, and Apple is they all have the same model. They're going to have a base, they're going to have a bonus target, and they're going to have an equity component with a potential sign-on, and the equity is 25% year over year. So for the purpose of this specific video, I'm just going to show you Meta just because it's in that order. And so this is a little bit just cleaner to negotiate. Again, 150 base. I put a 15% target bonus. Some of their positions will start at a 10% bonus, but again, this is just, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to show you the model, and then 200K in equity and a 0 sign-on. And that gets us to 222,500. So again, we might be thinking, hey, I want to add 10K to the base. Bonus target percentage is going to stay the same. I want 275K in equity, and I do want a small sign-on. And then again, bringing up to similar numbers that I used for Google, 175, 445, and 225, which gets us to that 337 number. Now, I always build in an average per year, not because it necessarily matters. These companies are going to give you stock refreshers, they're going to give you all sorts of incentives, there's going to be promos, but it's just a good number to track and follow. So now let's flip over and let's look a little bit at what this model might look like at Google. So if you are going to build one of these models, and I have a free resource on my website that I'll include in the YouTube description that you can use, every single time your offer gets updated, my recommendation is create a new tab. Why? So you can see improvements over time. So this is our initial, we had that original offer, we had our target, and we're really looking at our high anchor here. Now, when we come into this next one, let's imagine that our recruiter Jane came back and said, hey, they increased the base to 155, great. They brought the equity from 200 to 245, and they actually built in a 10K sign-on. So now we want to start to think about the counter. How are we going to counter that? And one great way to build your comp model, and I was very intentional in the way I built this, is a meet me in the middle model. So with our recruiter, Jane, we might say something like in that follow-up conversation, hey Jane, like really appreciate it, and I think we're getting closer. If you can just meet me in the middle on my numbers, I would strongly consider the offer. So meeting me in the middle was 165K base, 345K in equity, and a $17,500 sign-on bonus. And then you really stop talking, you're gonna gauge what Jane thinks, but that's why the high anchor is so valuable, because again, we're trying to get from that 155 up to 165, and that's in the middle of 175. Again, the 245 from 445 is 345, and then the 10 from 25 is 17,500. That meet me in the middle strategy makes it start to seem like you are willing to work with them quite a bit, and that is one of the huge benefits of a high anchor. So let's say it takes Jane a couple days to get back to us, and then Jane comes back and she says, in this case it's me, and it says, hey Jeff, we've hit that best and final. And so the best and final is we're actually able to hit our target of 160 on the base. Let's say that equity came up to 270K and we got that 210K sign on, which puts us at 296,600. Now if we go back to our initial number, we can see that's very close to our 298,500. So we're feeling pretty good about this offer overall, okay? But as we come back in, we just want to think about the numbers and say, okay, Jane hit us with the best and final. What can we do as a final counter? Best and final can feel very scary. So my recommendation is the last ask is extremely small. At best and final, pushing for a lot is just going to be a no, but pushing for just a small amount can sometimes be a yes. So when we get to that best and final and we're going to negotiate on that last item, we just want to negotiate on one thing. So in this case, I've kept the base the same, I've kept the sign on the same, and I've intentionally kept the equity under 300K, but I've asked for a little bit more. So it may sound like, Jane, I just want to start off by acknowledging all the great work you've done, and I want to acknowledge that you have told me best and final. And we are so close. If you can just get that equity number to 295K, I'll sign the offer. So this is the time where you actually go in and you go for the close and you try and get that final money. Then we ultimately see what Jane does, and then we would just kind of calculate our final offer, which let's say it's 160, comes in at 290 and 10K, and then we can say, oh, 304, 200 in year one. Okay, just by pushing on that best and final, we hit above our target number. I know this may feel a little bit rudimentary, and maybe I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle in this video. I haven't put in all the scripting items, but I just want to show you how I'm constantly thinking about working on these models, how I work on these models with my clients, and how we use these models to drive up compensation during the negotiation phase. I really hope this screen share and this insight into how the process works helps. Thanks so much.